They didn't make us wait for it, but we did eventually see at least part of a race in Japan, and it was well worth the wait in my opinion. So let's talk about my 3 winners and 3 losers. Starting with, of course, the 2-time world champion in Max Verstappen. It's safe to say that the win was never really in doubt. Verstappen himself said that the car was flying in the inter conditions, and no one was even close to his pace over the last 20 laps of that Grand Prix. He picked up his 12th win of the season, but with Leclerc behind, it looked like the championship was going to be rolling over to Austin. As he crossed the line, his engineer even said it wasn't quite enough. On top of that, there was confusion about how many points would actually be awarded in this Grand Prix. Because of the long delay under the red flag, we only completed 28 out of 53 laps, so just over half distance, which meant there should have been a reduced points total. But because the race resumed and the FIA deemed it sort of race worthy, full points were somehow awarded. And that still wasn't enough to win the title, even with full points awarded, however, as Max didn't have the fastest lap until the final corner, where Charles Leclerc went wide, a clear 5-second penalty as he rejoined ahead of Sergio Perez, but nudged the Mexican off the track, meaning that Charles Leclerc dropped into 3rd place. Verstappen now leads the championship by 113 points with only 112 up for grabs, and therefore is crowned the champion. Meaning another world championship clinched under strange and confusing circumstances for Max Verstappen. Honestly though, we all knew it was coming eventually, and how can you even describe this season? I've run out of superlatives for Max Verstappen. He's just been incredible all year and has taken the good with the bad. Remember, this season started really poorly for the team. Fast forward and Max is about to smash so many records. There are 4 races left to go. He only needs to win one of those 4 to match the most wins in a season, held by Sebastian Vettel and Michael Schumacher. And he's 47 points off the most points ever with, as I said, 112 still available. Max Verstappen is world champion for the 2nd time in his career, and he's done it in absolutely dominant fashion. We move from the front to the back for my first loser. It's got to be Carlos Sainz. Coming into this weekend, there were questions being asked, especially after the Spaniard had really struggled with pace in Singapore compared to his teammate Charles Leclerc. In all fairness though, Carlos Sainz qualified really well on Saturday, being just 600ths off of pole position, which somehow put him in 3rd. That's just how tight it was between those top 3. But when it came to the race, lost a place to Sergio Perez off the start, and then lost the rear end when aquaplaning and took himself out of the race before it even really got started, leading to a safety car and an eventual red flag stop. But he was only one of 2 drivers that didn't continue after the 2-hour stoppage we had under red flag conditions. I think the main concern for Carlos is that he still sits behind Russell in the standings with 4 races left to go. And look, the gap between him and Leclerc is nowhere near the gap between Verstappen and Perez, for instance. But I think that it's clear that Carlos Sainz still hasn't quite hit the heights that many were expecting from him after last year. Maybe I'm being too harsh putting him in the losers category, but I thought the fact that he didn't even really take part in the real race after the red flag will be a massive disappointment to him. Whereas my next winners will be anything but disappointed. It's Alpine. Another weekend where they showed that they are clearly the 4th fastest team this season. If not for a few reliability issues, they would be incredibly clear in 4th, which pains me to say as a McLaren fan. Nevertheless, this weekend you have to give them their praise. They even outperformed the Mercedes team, which we'll get into momentarily, but this just shows you the level that they were on this weekend. Ocon in particular took the news that Gasly will be joining the team in 2023 to heart and showed what he is all about. One of the best performances I've seen from him across his entire career this weekend. Qualified in 5th place, finished in 4th place, and after being hunted by Lewis Hamilton lap after lap, he had to keep his cool, and even the tiniest mistake would have cost him that 4th place finish, but he absolutely nailed it. Then there was the departing Alonso, who lost out a little due to not pitting early enough after staying out an extra lap compared to his teammate. I just don't think they wanted to double stack, whereas many other teams opted to do so. It wasn't too bad a loss though, as he still came out behind Vettel in what became 7th place after the rest of the stops had happened, but he was just kind of stuck there. The team opted to stop again and put him on some fresh intermediate tyres, and to be fair, he was so much faster than everyone else on track, and he made his way through the field all the way back up to 7th place. But you know what? They were very close to making it work, and one more lap, he would have absolutely flown by Vettel. Even without the extra place, they put themselves back up into 4th place in the Constructors' Championship and spent the day frustrating Mercedes, which are both steps in the right direction. On the flip side of that battle, I've decided to put Mercedes as my second loser from the Japanese Grand Prix weekend. Let's start with Lewis Hamilton, because it was the kind of afternoon where he kept knocking on the door only for no one to be home. He just stared at the back of that Alpine of Ocon for lap after lap, getting a wing or a wheel alongside the Frenchman, but never quite enough to really go for a move. In Lewis Hamilton's defense, when you're attacking like that in cars that are very equally matched over the weekend and in conditions that are very difficult, especially when to overtake you have to reach out to the slippery, greasy parts of the track, he was only going to get by if he forced an error from Ocon, and that just never came. Then there was George, and George thought that the team had actually made a mistake by pitting him too early, when in actual fact they probably pitted him a lap too late and lost out massively to those in the midfield pack. George Russell came out behind the likes of Vettel, Latifi, Norris, Tsunoda. To be fair to George, he had great pace, and those intermediate tyres worked incredibly well. He was putting together some magic overtakes, but if anything, that just showed how much potential that Mercedes had to perform in those conditions in particular, and he'll definitely be disappointed with an 8th place finish overall. And for me, that just caps off 2 weekends in a row, although Singapore was much, much worse, where Mercedes and George in particular just haven't quite been their consistent best. But they still have 4 races to try and pick up that ever-elusive win in 2022. Moving from a German team to a German driver, my final winner is Sebastian Vettel. 2 wet races in a row, and Aston Martin have been huge movers in both, picking up another great points haul here in Japan. Now, with 4 races left to go, they're comfortably in 7th place in the Constructors' Championship, up from 9th just 2 races ago, and suddenly they're within touching distance of Alfa Romeo in 6th as well. And it's all thanks to some incredible performances of Stroll more so last weekend, but this weekend saw Vettel pick up Driver of the Day. Didn't actually start very well for the 4-time world champion on his last outing in Japan. He made light contact with Alonso down towards turn 1, which sent him for a spin, put him at the back of the pack, and was 16th during the red flag conditions. However, the German gambled early off the restart and was first to come in for intermediate tyres, and that gamble paid off massively, putting him bang in the middle of the points, and the rest of the field, after they pitted as well a couple of laps later, he went from 16th to 6th and just had to hold on. And that's what he did. He did a great job defending from Alonso and beat the Spaniard to the line by a matter of meters, taking home 8 more points for the team, shuffles him up to 11th in the Drivers' Championship. Take a bow, Sebastian. And unfortunately, we have to delve into this. My final loser of the weekend has to be the stewards after what happened in those first 3 laps. The race started under very difficult conditions, with visibility at an absolute minimum, but apart from a few minor bumps, it looked like it was all going to be okay off the start line. As we discussed, Carlos Sainz lost the rear end of his Ferrari and collided with the wall, and correctly, the race was put into safety car conditions and then red flagged. But in the lead up to the red flag, whilst cars were still out on track behind the safety car, a tractor was brought onto the circuit. Pierre Gasly found himself trying to catch the back of the pack, who were following behind the safety car after he had a collision himself on lap 1 with an advertisement hoarding. As he was catching up to the back of the pack though, he passed the tractor which was on the track, and he was completely unaware that it was going to be there. Quite rightly, he was furious when he returned to the pits, as were many other drivers including Charles Leclerc, Sebastian Vettel, Lando Norris, all referring to what happened in Suzuka 2014 where Bianchi collided with a recovery vehicle and lost his life. Lando Norris even tweeted during the red flag, "How has this happened? We lost a life in this situation years ago. We risk our lives, especially in conditions like this. We won a race, but this, unacceptable." Gasly after the race said, "We all lost an amazing guy, an amazing driver 8 years ago on the same track in the same conditions with a crane. How? How today can we have a crane, not even in the gravel, on the racetrack whilst we are still on the track?" Quite rightly, I'm sure the drivers will have lots of questions for the FIA and the stewards to answer after this one. Let's of course though round out our winners and losers from this weekend with some honourable mentions from the Japanese Grand Prix. I tried so hard to fit him into my top 3, but Latifi in the points is just incredible. Back up into 20th place in the championship, where he deserves to be. Tsunoda had a home Grand Prix to forget after starting in the points after qualifying, but then losing out in the wet conditions and ending up outside of them. I also think Schumacher has to be a loser after he tried to go super long on the ultra wet tyres, waiting for a safety car that just never came. That just about rounds up my winners and losers from the Japanese Grand Prix weekend. It was well worth the wait in the end. Leave me a comment down below with your winners and losers from the Japanese Grand Prix. Leave a like whilst you're down there. Subscribe to the channel if you are new, and I will see you next time.
Well done, mate. That was a mega drive. And take this lap in and enjoy every minute of it.